Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Led by Life. We're your host. I'm Rafaela, and this is Hannah. And for anybody who's just listening in for the first time, Hannah and I met through our dear fascination with human design. And we instantly just made a connection around wanting to have deeper conversations around different human experiences and kind of geek out a little bit on human design and the gene keys. And she really sort of handed me this opportunity. I received this call to do something that I had mentioned I wanted to do, which is a podcast. And so here we are. And it's just been such a pleasure to talk to you and to do this together. So welcome back, everyone.
Oh, thank you. It's such a pleasure to do this with you too. I look forward to these catch-ups every week. And it is funny how it all kind of came together. I don't even know what came upon me. I was just like, let's do this. I felt the call as well. From
Yeah.
life. Yeah, I'm really proud of what we've created here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been really fun seeing it come together like on our Instagram.
I was just going to say the same thing.
Because it feels like a collection of our ideas and our thoughts and our reflections and our own observations and
Mm-hmm.
interpretations of these different energies. And yeah, it just feels like it's creating something that I haven't seen before. I don't know about you, but I haven't seen something like this before. So
No,
it's exciting.
not this unique, I will say. Yeah, I was just telling Hannah over the weekend that I feel like it's a digital work of art. If anybody hasn't checked out the Instagram, you should. Um, it's at Led by Life the pod.
Oh, Led by Life Pod, I think it
Left
is.
by I think I should know our own handle, but Led by Life pod. Yeah, Led by Life pod. And gosh, I have to give it up to you though, because Hannah's just been able to like bring her gift of beauty into this collection of art. And when you look at it, it looks beautiful to me. I love it. I'm proud of it. So if you want to see it, check it out. It has, yes, our thoughts and the different energies that we go through and different human experiences when it relates to human design and the gene keys. And so we'll kind of get started with today coming to the fifth gene key, and at its shadow is impatience, at its gift is patience, and at its Siddhi it is timelessness, and in the gene keys it's known as the gate of fixed patterns.
Yeah. And Rafa, this is a very important gate or gene key for you because this is your personality sun gate.
Mm.
And for anyone who's new to human design, this is kind of like the most important gate in your chart. So we all have a personality sun gate, which is, if you're looking at a human design chart, it's the very top right hand. It'll be a number with a decimal. And so yours is 5.2, right? Because you're a 2. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You're a hermit like me. So mine is 46.2 and Rafa's is 5.2, which means that the first number is the number is the gate, the personality sun gate. And then the decimal is what makes up your part of your personality profile. So it probably sounds a bit confusing for anyone who's new to it, but it's really just a very important part of your chart and arguably the most important gate or energy. And it's often referred to as what you're here to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I am really excited for today because I feel like you're going to have some really profound insights to share, as this is such a big part of who you are.
Yeah. Absolutely. You know, when I think of, um, you know, I've heard that like 2 4s sort of have this, uh, is it like a projection field, so to speak? Like we don't see ourselves very clearly. You
Yeah.
could say that about most humans, but for myself, I know that that can be the case. And when it comes to this, you know, this gate of, it's really around like rhythms and patterns and waiting, fixed waiting, patience, impatience. It's, I could see where the routines and rituals part is so in my nature, so in my nature. And in the believe I have it right, in the hexagram, it's in point 2. That's what makes up the profile. It's in the second line. And in the second line, it being like this hermit energy, but also being referred to as like this inner peace.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so true. If not for anything, human design just gives you that like loving mirror sense of validation that what you've like always been drawn to, or how you always maybe have been in certain ways, is not by accident, and there's nothing wrong with it. I will say that people have often reflected back to me of being a very patient person. Trust me, I have my moments. I'm not always patient, and that's been shared with me as well. But also just very routine and ritualesque. I don't know if that's a word, but yeah, just having routine and ritual in my life does bring me such a sense of inner peace and comfort. You know, I can think back to just different periods in my life where I've like learned something, or I've wanted to do a particular habit, so to speak. And if it sits with me and I really enjoy it, I'll just run with it. And you know, people have also shared with me, they're like, Rafa, like, yeah, you do things. And I mean, I do, but that comes very natural to me. And you know, the 2 4 is this like this natural, this easy breezy genius is sort of the way that it's referred to in human design. If you're looking at it in through Jenna Zoe and all of her creations and what she shares. And it's just really true. Like, I'll be the person where, not always, but there'll be periods of my life where I'm the one who gets up at 5:30 in the morning to go to the gym. Sometimes it's not 5:30, but I've always been the type of person to have like this just innate desire and energy to get up and get moving, because it just feels so good to me. It sort of allows me to like be in my element. And I've done that with, I think I've probably shared with you, maybe on your podcast, I believe it was, some of the things that I do, like journaling. Like, I don't just journal because I'm coping or I'm trying to like deal with something. Like, I'm journaling because it brings me a sense of like of inner peace. I can sort of just allow my thoughts and feelings to flow in a way that feels good to me. Meditation, when I learned about meditation, I got that and I ran with it. And these things I'm talking to you about are part of like my daily routine. And it's funny because if you read the human design book, so Hannah actually has the the 15, which is coming out of the identity center. And so we make up the channel here again.
5. And what's that channel called?
It's the channel of rhythm.
Channel of rhythm. Yeah.
Yeah. And when I was reading briefly through it, they said something about the 15 having like their flexibility. And maybe I had it wrong, but for some reason I was thinking back to, do you wake up early typically?
Generally. Yeah,
around the same
generally.
time?
Yeah, and I'm noticing that that feels natural or that feels good to me. So I'm trying to make that more of a habit, like having that
Yeah.
consistency. I'm also a quad left, so consistency is very important to me.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's so funny because in some ways, right? Like keep in mind that this energy is very much about being with the rhythms of life. As if we when we get into it in the gene keys, it could even be referred to, Richard says, as being attuned with like the seasons of nature. And if you're like a naturally inward person, then this will really resonate with you. And I was thinking how it kind of feels the same but different. Like I don't even know how. I'm just gonna go for it. What I'm saying is like I was thinking back to you were sharing with me like you're feeling tired, and I was wondering, you know, everybody, if you don't know, like Hannah's in Australia and I'm in Florida, the US. And so we're in very different time zones. And I was thinking, she's sleeping. I wonder if she like gets a good sleep, like gets some sleep past like an early part in the morning. And so when I was reading this, I was like, you know, you have this natural flexibility. For me, I go more into like patterns and rituals and flows that have to be that way. And trust me, they kind of do. But I also learned that there's this very unique quality of my human design where it's conflicting because in some places it'll say that I'm consistent, and in other places it'll say that I'm inconsistent. And I really resonate more with being inconsistent, and yet I have this very strong like way of life that it has me very in tune with rhythms and patterns and rituals and routines. And so to bring it back to what I was thinking about, I was like, I wonder if Hannah could just sleep, like sleep past like 5:30. And I don't know if you do or you don't. These are just my thoughts and I'm making them up. And how actually this is very sort of like backwards to what I think the book is saying, the information in the human design text. But I don't know. Now I feel like I'm kind of talking in circles. Do you get what I'm saying?
I sort of do. I hadn't thought of the 15th gate energy. I guess I'd thought of it in terms of more people, right? So not so much about like flexibility with myself, but more so with like the way I engage with other people, because it is the gate of extremes, I think. I'm
Yeah.
just going to that. Yeah, the gate of extremes. And I have throughout my life attracted quite extreme people and circumstances into my aura, into my life. And I do have this ability to kind of be flexible with people and be really accepting of all kinds of different human behavior. And sometimes that is to my own detriment. And I've put up with a lot of shit from people for longer than I probably should have. But I think it's also a beautiful gift to be able to be accepting of the extremes of life and of other people. So I hadn't really thought of it in terms of like flexibility within my own life. I think that's something I'm still trying to figure out is like my kind of schedule, because, and I might have shared this with you, I think I did last time or recently, that this has been the first year for me where I've been self-employed, working for myself. So I haven't had the routine and the structure that I'm used to of having a job to go to. And it's changed a lot over the last few years. I've gone from working like a 9 to 5 or more like a 7 till 4, like it was just weird hours, to then working part-time as I was kind of transitioning out of that into more working for myself and creating my business. So I still haven't found the rhythm or the pattern that feels good to me. And in a way, you're helping me to create this by just having this weekly conversation, this weekly meeting that is kind of scheduled in, and it's giving me a lot of structure at the moment. And it's funny because even though over the last year and a bit, I've been in this weird period of trying to like find a new way of being. And, I've been trying to feel into what feels good. Life has always presented these things that give me some kind of structure when I haven't had that structure. So, for example, I quit my job in May last year, and I then started working with Nikki, I think not that long after. And so I was catching up with her fortnightly, which was giving me, and Nikki is our human design teacher for anyone who's interested. And that was giving me some sort of structure. And then she created the circuitry workshop, which is where Rafa and I met. And that was giving me a lot of structure because it was like a weekly, same time every week meeting over Zoom. And then after that, you and I started catching up weekly or fortnightly. So in a way, even though I've kind of felt like I've been really out of rhythm, out of structure, and out of routine over the last however long it's been, life has always presented me with these beautiful opportunities to create some sort of structure in amongst the chaos of change.
Which really, when you were sharing that about change, I was thinking about how it's related into the fifth gene key, and something that I remember coming across was like at one of these frequencies, we have a collective fear as human beings of change, and how that ties into our impatientness.
Yeah, so let's talk about impatience then, shall we? The shadow of the fifth gene key. I want to know how impatience feels for you, how it's presented in your life. And I want to know, because I feel like you really embody the gift of patience. I want to know what that journey's been like for you. Has it been something that you've had to work through, or has it come somewhat more naturally to you?
You know, it's interesting because you just reminded me of how, in some ways, I have felt very patient with others. Again, it's like now I'm thinking about it, how it relates to like my relationship with other people or things, outside of me, really. And it's just only because not too long ago, my mom had mentioned something to me about getting sort of like dismembered, just really dysregulated. I forget the word she used for me around change. And I sat there and I was like, really? Huh? Like, I didn't think so. But looking back, now I recognize how, and it's so funny because synchronistically, like, that's what I've kind of been working on in the past week. And what I've been looking at is, can I allow myself to change? Can I allow myself to flow into a new season of being? And how I've cultivated that, I don't really know. Again, like sometimes I think when we embody one of these gates or these centers or these gifts, that for me, it does feel sort of very natural. And I wonder if it's really just kind of come out of like, there's always been a lot of change in my life. Outwardly, it seemed like I've come from a family that has been blended many times, meaning like I've been through quite a few divorces and significant separations at a young age. And that has always sort of like had me having to adapt with the circumstances, even when I couldn't really like make any sense of it. And back then, one thing that I always can go back to that helped me sort of have this inner peace was sports and music. I was always listening to music with almost everything that I did. And I was always in some sort of sport. And I loved it. So, I'm trying to think like outside of that, also I have, and I'm not sort of sharing the things that I've gone through to like list them out and say that this is the reason why I've cultivated patience. But it is like, I went through a period of my life where I was diagnosed with a chronic illness. And I would say that I probably did sort of have this, I mean, it was very difficult at times, but I don't ever remember saying like, I want this to be over. Now being in that space, I can see how I find myself saying things like that. Like, I'm over this. I'm ready for this to be done. And that's how I can see my impatience coming up. And then really when I say something like that, I kind of get like, I take a step back and then realize like so this timing thing, there's like a very unique process of timing that gives me the patience to recognize that it's going to pass. Like, it's not that cliche saying, this too shall pass. That's sort of like what comes up for me in this way of cultivating patience. Because in some way I feel like nothing lasts forever. And that might sound a little bit pessimistic, which is at the shadow of impatience. But for me, it's really not. It's sort of more so of understanding that life has a flow, and that I can either choose to sit here and get actually pessimistic about it and get down with it, or I can sort of just like allow it to be. And I don't even know if I'm answering your question, if that's how I cultivated patience. I really sometimes don't know. Like, I don't know.
It's brought up a few things for me. And the first being just trust. It just, I think, comes down to this trust in life, trust in the process, trust in the flow of things. And like you shared, this too shall pass. That's all about trust, trusting that whatever you're going through, whatever's happening is just temporary. And a big thing that came up for me as I was reading this chapter was how it, again, I think I said this last time, it again relates to presence and to mindfulness and the ability to be with whatever experience is happening. That really is patience. It's the ability to wait and to sit back and not try and control things. When we're trying to control things, we are impatient. We're not allowing things to be as they are. So that was just another thing that came up for me as I was reading this. And And I wonder if that's why for you, mindfulness is something that does come naturally and something that you are quite interested in. And maybe similarly for me, but in a different way, because it connects with that like rhythm of life and that the presence, because this is another, I think it's the 10th gate is one that I have as well defined in my chart, and that's all about being. And so there's so many similarities we can draw here through the different energies. But yeah, I want to read a few things that I've highlighted from the book, if that's okay, because he talks about at the lower frequency, impatience is a deep distrust of life. So patience is the trust in life, in trusting the timing of life. And he also says here, the only way to escape impatience is to escape the mind and its realm of time. And this again just makes me think of mindfulness and presence. It's not getting caught up in what our minds think should be happening, how our minds can create any kind of story about timing or time as a mental construct. Whereas when we can get out of the mind, we can then start to be more patient and trusting and to, escape the impatience. So what does that bring up for you?
You mentioned something before you went to the book about this sense of trust and how it relates to so many other things that we've talked about so far. And something that comes up when you go through this fifth gene key and what Richard Rudd shares with us is that like the fifth is sort of seen as this backbone for all 64 frequencies. And there was something in there around how they're all sort of like rooted within this spectrum of patience, not of patience and impatience, but of this spectrum of consciousness. And I'm forgetting exactly what it was that it's the exact words, but my point is that with what he's sharing with us, if we look at the fifth gene key, and if it is to be sort of like this backbone of all of them, well, it makes sense how in one shadow you get to meet one gift. And what I mean by that is like it all sort of just like fluctuates, and when you allow yourself to sit long enough with whatever it is that might be presenting itself, you ultimately can be with the gift. And the name of this one is, I believe it's called Becoming the One in the gene keys. That's sort of how he refers to it, because of the Siddhi is this idea of timelessness. And again, there's this repeated expression of like the words that we say and the language that we give to all of this really can't express the magnitude of the Siddhi. It's sort of just this embodied thing that comes about. And if we look at it that way, that in the shadow, if you can be with it long enough that it presents you with a gift, then I really think that like everything has its perfect timing.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned like the fluctuation between patience and impatience, because that was one of the biggest things that kind of came up for me as well. And he says here, like all the shadows, it's simply a matter of perception and attitude.
Right.
And this really spoke to a feeling that I've been getting with every gene key that I've explored so far. So I've kind of gone through a lot of the ones that I have in my chart before we started this podcast, especially the ones that are in my incarnation cross. And then also on this journey that we've been on together of exploring each of the gene keys so far up to the fifth, I've noticed that for me, it feels like it is just a shift in perception often, or a tweak. It feels like a tweak of energy. So, and we will kind of go between the shadow and the gift frequency, and we'll kind of fluctuate between them. But over time, as we become, I think, more aware of how the shadow presents, so again, being present, being mindful, being aware of how these patterns show up in our lives, we can then start to transcend the shadow frequency and more embody the gift, because it's really in awareness where we can start to make those changes if we want to. If we want to embody those higher frequencies of this energy, if we want to be more patient rather than more impatient, all we have to do is notice it, don't we? We just have to notice where the impatience is coming up, and then just have that tweak, that subtle shift, or the ability, like you said, to be with it. Then the patience will start to come up, and start to, we can start to embody that gift more. So yeah, I'm just seeing so many patterns here with all the different energies we've explored so far. And if we go back to this fifth gene key, he talks about it being the pulse of life. So I just think that's such a beautiful, I can't relate to it perhaps in the same way that feels for you, but how does that feel for you?
Yeah. Well, as you're sharing it again about like this tweak of perspective, and I really think of like when we're in a moment of impatience, like you had mentioned earlier, being in this sort of mind energy of thinking that like life isn't going the way in which we feel it should be. And who's to say that it's not? Really? That's sort of what I think about when you share like this pulse of life. Because when I think back at those like experiences, granted as a kid, like nobody wants to go through those. Like no kid's like, oh, I can see how this is just, perfectly put in here and it's part of life's rhythm and blah, blah, blah. Like, no. But I think when you meet it like retrospectively, you can sort of see how it was sort of just for a moment in time that you cultivated something out of that, whether that be to sit with discomfort and to know that discomfort can pass, or maybe it's that you're just learning to have some more compassion for yourself or for others. Again, things that we've all sort of talked about. But this pulse of life, it sort of does, I don't know, when I hear it, I like feel it to the point where like I can't even really make sure if the words that I'm saying right now make sense. It's coming back to having this sense of trust that, right now, this is sort of the way life is. And it's so funny because are we ever impatient when things like are going our way?
So it's, in a way, it's judging the experience as good or bad, and we're able to be patient when things are going our way.
Yeah.
But we're not able to, or we find it harder to be patient through the difficult times because we just want to get it over. We just want to get it over with.
Yeah. we just sort of want to like rush through or get to wherever it is that we're going.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't really work that way.
It doesn't work that way. And like you said, often when we're in it, we might not be able to make sense of it. But looking back, we can kind of see how things perhaps had to happen the way they did and how they shape us into who we are. And I think there's certain things in life that we might never make sense of. We might never be able to make sense of certain tragedies or challenges or difficult things that we go through. I'm not sure. I don't have the answer for that. But what do you think?
Well, you're kind of reminding me how similar to last week, we're still in this understanding circuit, this collective understanding logical circuit, where I feel as if though, and I can't really remember like the last episode we have of it felt this way, but this circuit is very much more logical. It is based in pattern. It is sort of a little bit cooler. It doesn't have such an emotional sensing. You use this word sensing, right? It's not like the sensing circuit. And so when you ask me sort of some of these questions, they feel hard to explain. One, because when you embody certain gifts and they become natural, like to be asked how you do that, it's hard. Like, I don't know how to answer that question. I can embody it and reflect it, but to answer it is very different. So that's why I go back to like patterns and rhythms, or like the logical things, the way things float out in life and how it relates to this, because it is in this circuit, so to speak. And that was one part of like not necessarily knowing how to like put the language to it. And also that one way to sort of share this with others is to share how I've learned it looking back at these patterns.
To make sense of it.
Right.
Yeah. The logic comes after, in the ability to reflect and have that understanding, perhaps.
Yeah. I'm wondering, like,
and it's funny.
Go ahead, because I'm wondering what's coming up for you, because I can see it.
Well, it was so funny that you said about the natural things that come naturally to you, you're not able to often explain. And that's such a hermit thing, because, and I was watching, I think it was Jenna Zoe's, because I'm a 2/5. So Ralph is a 2/4, I'm a 2/5 personality profile. And the 2 is the hermit, and it's all about naturalness and things. So the reason why we do have this kind of hermit energy, this need to be alone and to be in our own space and our own aura, is because that's where we can cultivate our natural gifts. That's where we can kind of do our thing and be with whatever our gifts are. But it's, she was saying something along the lines of, you're not able to explain your gifts, people. And this is something that human design has really shown me as well, is that we often can't see our own gifts because they are things that just come naturally to us, or they are just things that are inherent in us. So you might not be able to explain patience, perhaps, or how you are able to be so patient. But it's in being around other people where you can kind of see those gifts reflected back to you. And so I just want to share some of my reflections then, perhaps for how I see patience in you, because I do think you really embody this gift. And I noticed it early on in our friendship and in creating this podcast. I noticed myself being impatient with certain things, like wanting to kind of, I don't know, like wanting to get things going perhaps quicker than they needed to, or wanting to kind of rush the process. And even just in like the way that you sometimes respond to messages, like you're very considered, you're very thoughtful in the way that you kind of respond to things, and that really does come across to me as patience. So it's interesting because even in our conversations and when you speak, you do have this kind of patience to your thought process and to your sharing and vocalizing what you're thinking and what's coming up for you. You're very kind of considered and slow sometimes, and not in a bad way, like it's just in a very peaceful way. Whereas I notice myself wanting to just like get the words out and feeling sometimes uncomfortable in the pause. Whereas I think that you seem to come across to me as someone who is very comfortable in a pause, in being able to just take a moment to kind of think about what you want to say or have that consideration. So I just want to reflect that back to you, because I think that is such a gift and something that we all could do more of, perhaps if we were able to be more patient and more thoughtful and considered in our words and our actions, then we might not be as reactive or as impulsive.
Oh, thank you. It feels good. It really does. I hope everybody sort of can have a friend like Hannah to reflect back these things to them if they don't see it. But it's interesting you say like how I can respond like considering, right? Because there's this thing, and you might catch it here in the podcast when we talk, but I will sometimes be speaking, and this usually happens in like close circles, and I'll stop like mid-sentence and I'll just stare and nothing is happening. I promise you, nothing. Like, I'm not getting distracted. I mean, I know when I am getting distracted, but what I'm talking about is not that. I'll just talk and then I'll stop and I'll stare, and people are like, hello, are you there? Like,
Has it frozen?
yeah, like, why'd you stop speaking? And I don't have control over this. It's not like I'm just like, oh, let me stop talking. Like, no. And I wonder if it's something that's just sort of happening beyond my awareness of like this energy of just bringing down what needs to be shared. But I promise you that the words aren't flooding through my head. Like, it's literally a moment of like pause. And I just never sort of like saw it that way until now. And so I wonder if like that's where some magic is happening, that like I didn't relate to it this way because I was, this has been happening for a while now, and I'm okay with it. I have no problem with it. I'm just like, yeah, like I'm there because I'll pick up right where I was, kind of like a rhythm, almost. Maybe I could see where life I could see where I probably embody this idea of rhythms.
So have you noticed it in yourself before? Or are you just noticing it now as it's kind of reflected back to you that you do? It's something that you do.
No, I'm sort of like sensing it in some way now. And I wonder if it's because you and I make up the channel of rhythm.
Well, I notice I'm a lot more considered when I'm around you. I'm a lot more, I think you're teaching me how to slow down my speaking and my thoughts. And I think this is something we all need.
Yeah.
Like, it helps us to slow down and to realize that we don't have to rush things. We don't have to be so impatient.
Yeah.
We can just slow things down. So
Yeah.
even, it's just making me think of something that Nikki said to me once. She said, it's not about, you're not putting words to the frequency, you're being the frequency. So you're not saying, oh, I'm patient. You're just being patient. I just got chills.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm so happy you just got chills, because I know what that feeling is like. And I'm sure many people listening to this know what that feeling is like. But when you have chills, and this is just my own interpretation of it, when you are sharing something, you are in a moment of timelessness. I don't know if it's the Siddhi, but that's how I see it. Like, you are so connected with what you are sharing in that moment that it hits you on a visceral level. It's like Source's response to, like, yes, like, you've got it. Like you're just in it. Like, not that you didn't get something, but that it's just like you're just so connected.
It's like a resonance.
Yes.
Do you think that's what chills are? Goosebumps, chills?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
just like a knowing, just like, whoa, that's true.
Yeah.
That's like a truth. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's like a capital T truth.
Mm.
And sometimes the capital T truth is like, you feel the chills because you were so connected in that moment, and then the other person really, like, they felt that. They didn't hear it, they felt it. You could almost feel it in my response. And I can, I'm thinking of sometimes, like, when I, like, will be with a client and I get that feeling, and ooh, it's so juicy and spot on that it just feels so connected. I keep coming back to that word of, like, oh, that was great. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I was thinking before that this gift of patience must be such a gift to your clients, because you also, in being patient, are able to listen and able to really, I think that's also another gate as well, isn't it? The listening, like the ability to listen. You've got that as well, haven't you? Yeah. But what a gift that is, to just be able to create a space for people to just open their hearts up to you, or to express whatever they're feeling in the moment, and to have someone just be so patient and so supportive and just able to listen and just hold that space. Like, yeah, that's really a gift that you have. And
Yeah, I appreciate that. It kind of does give me a little bit more words to work with, and when it comes to patience, it's because it goes back to this idea of trust. It's our minds that will tell us that whatever's happening right now is not for our highest good, because it's uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good. It's not happening on our timeline. But who's to say that our timeline is the correct one?
Yeah.
I was just thinking about, like, this, what I was sharing with you before we started today, this past weekend, just being in a period of, like, emotion, just like such, like, so emotional of things. And I will actually say that I didn't feel so drawn out into, like, oh, this is going to, like, last forever. Let me get it over with. It lasted as long as it needed to last. And with some rest and some natural routine and ritual, I've sort of come out on the other end of it. And I think back to how this sort of relates to human design, and I feel like human design gives you the more tangible, practical, like experiences or ways to exercise out like the gene keys, the frequencies, is that, you know, my very well, not very well, but my rituals, my practices that I have that are really, really important and really, really healthy for me are always the thing that brings me back to myself. And they're just so helpful.
Same. Yeah. Which I think is so important as, again, a second line, and also as a manifestor. It's so important for us connected with ourselves so that we can feel connected to that, so that we can feel connected to source, so that we can have that cultivate that connection with source.
Yeah.
Because that's where we receive these divine hits of inspiration, these divine urges.
You know, you're reminding me how, like, so again, for me, feeling like more things can be inconsistent, yet having this sun gate being in the 5th, and then also being a manifester, having this manifester energy of like initiating. I almost sometimes I don't just initiate anything and everything, because it doesn't necessarily feel like it's the right timing. And so there is this sort of idea of waiting, which goes back to like patience. That life will sort of present me with the resources and the energy to fulfill out whatever needs to be fulfilled out, but it's just going to look so drastically different to other people sometimes, I feel. And that's something where that's where I have to deeply practice the patience, because I can become very impatient with not being where I think I want to be in life, specifically around this comes up so heavy for me in the work that I do. And knowing that I'm still like somewhat new into being a licensed therapist and to, you know, coaching with people, like this well-being practitioner that I often refer to sometimes, I have this idea in my mind of, you know, how many clients I should have and how much I should be making and the things that I should be putting out there and how I should be presenting myself. And honestly, like, that's just not really the way it's going to go. And I've had to cultivate so much patience, and I'll notice when I'm becoming impatient with myself, because I get worrisome to no degree, and I'll start fixating. And this is why, like, this sort of does lap on all of the other things we've sort of talked about, and how everything is so interconnected, because it brings me back to having to say, wait, hold on, like, take a deep breath, pause, trust. So it's all going to work out at some point, whenever that is. And so all I have to really do is do the things that make me feel good right now. And that's the routines and the rituals. And so I'm actually in a place of life where this is what I'm kind of working through. It's just doing the things I know that keep my body good and healthy, and letting the rest sort of flow, not trying to control it on this timeline, which, you know, it's so funny because we started this podcast with my idea of like, I thought I was going to be in Portland soon.
Yeah.
And I've had to relinquish so much control with that and be patient with myself of the timing. Like, it's okay that it's not happening when I thought it was going to happen.
Because you could force things, you could will it into existence, but then you're just fighting against the natural flow.
Yeah.
Fighting against that patience and that trust in timing and trust in that you will be called to wherever you'll be called to when the time is right. And I think this again relates back to the second line. This keeps coming up to me because something about the second line is it has this projection field, same as the fifth line that I have. I'm not sure about the fourth, but the second line has this projection field, which actually does protect you because you're in your, we are in our hermit, in our kind of retreating in our own space. And then what happens is we get called out. Life calls us out to share our natural gifts. So in a way, when you are able to be patient and to trust life and to trust that you will receive the right calls in the right time, then you can trust that instead of forcing things, the most ideal kind of invitations will come, these invitations by life to share your natural gifts. Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's like a leaf blower or some kind of power tool. I don't know if you can hear that in the background. It's distracting me. Yeah.
You know,
so where you
go ahead. No, go.
No, I was going to shift the direction, so I want to hear what you have to say.
Okay, hold on to it. I was just going to say I had taken a little look over and noticed that the 5th meets the 15th in the identity center. And so I can really see how it's this, and I don't know, because I haven't necessarily looked into the whole channel, but it, for you and I can see where it really does, it's sort of called the design of being in the flow. And for, you know, you were saying how like it gives you this structure, having this podcast, the way we've set it up and everything. And in some ways, it's really done the same for me as well, but not so much on a like daily kind of structure, like in the day structure. It feels much bigger than that. And I think that's really beautiful and something that I can like just sort of be with, and I kind of want to just like keep to myself rather than share, because it feels really big. But I say that because there's like this sacral energy meeting the identity center, which so here we have like this pulse of life, literally, and then the identity center with it being this like magnetic monopole of being the driver of life. So I just find it very fascinating how you get these sort of reflections or reminders of slowing down, and I sort of get like this real deep sense of trust in the process of life, which I don't have right, that's what I mean, in a sense of direction. And so it's like, it's just kind of crazy and kind of cool, and it's just so fascinating. And this is why I love human design, is because of moments like this. Like, imagine if we could just sort of like uniquely share, like, and connect, whether it's in the connection or in the gaps with those around us, it just sort of feels like it can bring for so much more acceptance of how each person lives out their experience.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's in bringing awareness to these parts of ourselves and noticing how all the different frequencies show up for us, we can get a greater sense of understanding of how we operate, of who we are. And then we can, from there, accept ourselves more, which I think leads to loving ourselves more.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of like the flow.
Well, and
Awareness, acceptance, and love. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so funny
What were you
because, well, I was going to just say that in the fifth gene key, Richard Rudd talks about how when you're, we all, like, as human beings, want to be in this feeling of love. I want to be with love, be in love, and kind of like we're all sort of striving for in some sense, whether it's just this idea of love, however you take that, however that sits for you. And that when you can be with this, which can be cultivated with having a patience with life, you become more open-hearted. And, you know, for the things that aren't so easy in life, that don't feel so great, coming at them with this presence, awareness, acceptance, and this sense of like being open-hearted feels peaceful. Yeah.
I'm just taking a pause. I'm
I
taking a
noticed.
leaf out of your book.
I noticed. Yeah.
Because it makes me think of shadow work and how shadow work is looking at these parts of ourselves that we find it harder to look at and kind of, in a way, diving deep into the discomfort that brings up of having to accept ourselves as we are and accept all these different parts of ourselves. But shadow work, and I haven't really explored it all that much myself, other than just through this process of learning more about myself and human design and the gene keys. But I think that's where we can find a deeper sense of love for ourselves. And when we can really love ourselves, we have such a greater capacity to love others. So yeah, if love is something that we're all searching for, then maybe it is in diving into these shadows where we can, I don't even want to say find it, but experience the greater sense of love.
Yeah.
And then this is where the patience comes in, because the patience is giving ourselves that space to be with whatever comes up through that process, to be with the uncomfortable feelings of looking at the parts of ourselves or the parts of life that we don't want to experience and we don't want to look at.
Yeah. Well, and in the shadows, you get to meet the fears of life. And when you face your fears just a little bit, you become a little bit more free and a little bit more liberated and a little bit more in love. And it doesn't have to be so hard. You know, I say that just as a reminder, because life is inevitably going to throw you some curveballs, and things are going to happen. And to know that we have like a toolbox of just different shifts in perspectives, or different tangible things, or different inherent gifts, inherent strengths that maybe we've just lost along the way. We didn't know we really had, but we do. Maybe those fears don't have to be so scary. Yeah.
Yeah, just a shift, just a tweak.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me think of I feel like Marianne Williamson said it, but it might have come from A Course in Miracles, because I know she's done a lot of work with that, A Course in Miracles. But it was, a miracle is just a shift in perception from fear to love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just sort of sat with me of that, how maybe that's exact. I mean, it just circles back to like the beginning, and can be said so many different ways, the same thing of our impatience being just a shift in perspective into, away from distrust into trust. Yeah.
And it's not easy.
Mm.
It's not easy.
No.
It's a practice, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Practice. But it doesn't have to be hard. I say it's not easy, but it doesn't have to be hard. That doesn't really make sense.
Well, it's back to this like understanding logic circuit that we're in right now. I think that for you, it feels like you mentioned like that probably doesn't really make sense. But on some level, at the simplest level, like it does.
Yeah.
We don't need to make it harder for ourselves.
Yeah. It makes me think about mindfulness again, because
The mindfulness queen, that's what I'm going to call you.
Well, it's funny because, and I discovered this part of my chart recently. It's the 54th gate. I think I shared with you over a voice note, but it's all about, and I have it in the 4th line, and it's all about learning through teaching. Like that's how I actually learn things, is through teaching things, and vice versa. Like if I teach what I'm learning, that helps me and it helps the other person. Does that make sense?
Yes. Is it the gate of stimulation?
I think so.
Is it in the ajna?
No, it's in the root, I believe.
Okay, so I'm mixing them up.
I think it's about like perseverance,
the drive.
Yeah,
Yes.
aspiration, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But interestingly, it's made me think about my own experiences and my own teachings. And it's funny because mindfulness is something that just comes very naturally to me, and it's something that I understand. Like I haven't actually done a lot of study on it. I have, trained to become a meditation teacher, and I've done all the certification to do that. And I've done some sort of research into mindfulness, but these concepts just kind of come naturally. I just kind of naturally understand them. But often I'm finding that I'm having to learn, I'm having to notice. So the concepts come naturally to me, but the actual practice of being present doesn't always come naturally to me. So I'm having to kind of learn and teach myself in the process of teaching other people. And I'm trying to think of why I brought this up in the first place. Oh, about talking about, it doesn't have to, it's hard, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
Because I've been thinking a lot about this as it relates to mindfulness recently, because it's so simple. It's so simple, bringing our focus attention to the present moment. It's such a simple concept, but it's not always easy. We have to remind ourselves to do it. We have to notice those moments throughout our day where we're not present, where we're distracted, where our mind is racing, where we're rushing, where we're being impatient. We have to notice these moments to then bring ourselves back to the present and to be more mindful. So it's just funny. I'm just kind of noticing this correlation, because some of the things that may be so simple might not always come to us naturally, or might be things that we need to practice more. And I wonder if perhaps for other people like myself who don't have this gift of patience defined, we can know consciously that it's good to be patient and that we want to be trusting in life and the process and the flow of life. But it really is sometimes a practice, and noticing those moments of impatience, and noticing when we are rushing or we're wanting things to be different than the way they are,
Yeah.
in order to make that simple shift, that subtle shift from
Yeah.
impatience to patience.
This is just like my curiosity, but I wonder if it's because the gate might sit in the root, which, if I'm remembering correctly, for you is undefined. And when you think about concepts, you're thinking about like the ajna, which is defined. So it totally makes sense. And I can totally relate. Like, there are concepts that I just understand. And then there are the embodying of that concept that I'm just like, oh, guess I'll try again tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there can be like this consistency in an area that's inconsistent. Yeah.
Which is exactly what I was trying to tell you with like this frequency of like being patient, having this fifth gate energy, and yet also sort of having this manifestor part of initiating, but then also feeling the part where I'm just inconsistent in my way of doing things. It's like, how can I be with all of those polarities all at once? Gosh, it's been such a practice. Yeah.
And that's really what human design is all about, isn't it? Just bringing attention to all of these different parts of ourselves that sometimes are in conflict with one another, but then if you bring it all together, it makes sense, because it's who we are.
Yeah.
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 So I want to ask you now about, with this being your sun gate, your personality sun, that means that it's a part of your incarnation cross, right? I'd love for you to share a little bit about your incarnation cross and how you see this gate energy being a part of that.
So, like I've shared before, the incarnation cross is the right angle cross of consciousness, and that's made up by my fifth gate coming out of the sacral, the 35 coming out of the throat, and then the 63 and the 64 coming out of the ajna. And when I first read the overview through the gene keys, not through human design, but through the gene keys, of what each of these different energies embody and what they sort of represent, and then tying it with this language of the right angle cross of consciousness, I was like, this is why it sort of feels this like innate pull now to go towards spirituality, and to this draw towards, I mean, it originated with mindfulness and meditation, but from there grew. And so this pull to really be connected to something greater greater than myself, which is not somewhere that I ever thought that I would be. Like, I never thought that I'd be talking about spirituality. And so how it relates, like you said, it's what you're here to learn. The personality sign being what you're
what you're here to do.
Oh, what you're here to do. Sorry, yeah, I was saying what you're here to learn, because what you're here to learn, which is, forget which one, but I believe it's 63 or 64. Either way, both of them come out of the head center for me, is why there's such a fascination with the concepts of actual consciousness. And sometimes in spirituality and things like, I'm just thinking about a bunch of different books that I've read that I have just felt really like attuned with and would love to share with other people. But when it comes to the fifth of like what I'm here to do, I feel as if it's being this example of trust. Trusting in life's timing, trusting in the process of things. I mean, really that simple. Now I'm really curious to go back and read what it says, because when I read it, I was like, oh, that feels right. But yeah, I mean, if I bring it all together, that's really what it sort of stands out to me, of practicing these deeper principles that really have me feeling sometimes just a little different. Honestly, it's just me speaking honestly. And yeah, I don't know. I guess that's kind of like all I could really say. I don't know much else other than that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they say that the personality sun gate is what you're here to do, but in a way it also probably is what you're here to learn, because through learning to embody what you're here to do, or through learning about it, it can then help you to, again, it all just comes back to awareness, like having the awareness that this is such a big part of what you're here to do can then help you to learn how you can perhaps transcend the shadow to express the gift.
Yeah.
And being a gift that you then share with others.
Well, you're just reminding me that it was sort of shared with me, and now it's all kind of coming back to me, of like this fifth gate of being this expression of like doing the thing that you love and repeating it, really being a master of it. And that being the reasoning for like these quantum leaps that I'll take in life, which like I know it because I've done it. Like when I came across mindfulness meditation, I was meditating all the time. I mean, I still am. But when I first came across it, like I remember things sort of just started happening in life where they were like that. And there was just a deep trust in these moments. I was like, so I decided that I wanted to, I think I might have started with like a Deepak Chopra 21 day thing. I think that's where it kicked it off. And a little bit before that, because right before that, I had decided I was going to leave a job. I was like, I don't really want to do this anymore. I don't know what I'm doing, that I'm out. And I left, and I had time. So this is what I was doing. And then in the time of being that job, I got offered another opportunity to do something. And I was like, all right, that's cool. And then something came along and I was like, this doesn't feel right anymore. I'm not going to do this. It was like going against like my own ethics. And I left. And then another opportunity came up. And this happened in 3. It left, got a job, left, got a job, maybe 2, but it felt like 3, something like that. And what kept me grounded through all of that change was my meditation practice. Me cultivating a connection in a relationship with something greater than myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that. It's like there's going to be these things that come up, these challenges, these changes. That's just inevitable. But if we can create some sort of space through a meditation practice or some kind of way to come back to ourselves and connect with ourselves, then we can cultivate that trust in life, that trust in the process.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think back to some of the hardest things I've been through, and in a way, I've had to kind of surrender to the process.
Yeah.
So what would your advice be then to anyone who's feeling impatient or feeling like they don't trust the process or trust where they're at right now, or feeling like they want things to be different than the way they are? What would be your advice?
Focus on what's going well. Number 1. Make room for self-care. And make time, which is probably number 1, to cultivate a practice and a relationship with something greater than yourself. To know that you are so deeply supported in this, whatever it is you're going through, and that it's okay that it doesn't look the way that you wanted it to. Yeah. So good. Yeah. Oh, I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
What are you
Thanks
going to
for
say?
sharing so much of your heart and who you are, and teaching us all to be more patient, more trusting. I thought of I think it's a Lao Tzu quote, and it goes, nature never rushes, yet everything gets accomplished. Something like that. And that just, doesn't that just go to show like this relation, like we're part of nature. We are nature. And nature can teach us about the seasons of life, that changes are inevitable, and yet it shows us that I think of like a tree, and it sheds all its leaves in winter, and it's just like this embodiment of trust that in time it will flourish once again.
I had to look this up recently because I was really curious as to like what's actually happening to the plants and the trees in the winter. I don't know what you call it. I'm not a botanist, but the part where the leaf is from the branch, when the leaves fall, that part of the branch like encapsulates encapsulates. Am I making up another word that I don't know how to say? It shuts off. It creates like this barrier to protect itself during the winter.
Oh, like the edge where the leaves fall off.
Yes.
Right.
And it does this. And then when spring comes, it opens up again and then it grows. It's why if you look at the trees in the winter, the trees aren't dead. So like when you're going through something rough, it's not the end of the world. But if you protect yourself with some tools to keep you warm and safe, then when it passes, like you'll come out of it again. And I just share that because when you said tree, I have this post that I posted just not too long ago that I have to give credit again. Clearly, we've learned a lot from Nikki, and we so dearly appreciate and love her. She said to me, she's like, Rafa, a tree doesn't tell itself to grow. It doesn't say grow, kind of like when you were sharing, like, doesn't your skin heal?
Yeah.
It heals. It goes through its process. The tree grows. Like nature, coming back to this thing of nature, like nature is not out here yelling at itself like, why aren't you tall enough yet? Or why aren't you sunny enough?
Or like, looking at the other trees and comparing itself to the other trees.
Right? Like, I want to look like that one over there. I want to have those colored leaves. Like, it's just not doing that. It's simply being and trusting. And it's so uniquely orchestrated and protected. And just, gosh, we got to give it up to nature. Thank you for that.
But we are nature. We just have this mind that gets in the way. And so it's just coming back to the body, coming back to ourselves, coming back to that connection with the greater universe. I find nature so healing. Like if I'm having a hard time, I just have to go out for a long walk in nature and I just always feel better. Always.
Yeah. Definitely gives you like a place to like reset.
And that's what came to me before as well, to bring it back to what we were talking about earlier. Like we almost judge these harder times as being bad. And it's like we judge the winter, we might look at a tree and think, oh, it looks dead, it looks barren. But it's not dead. It's just going through a natural phase. And we need these phases. We need these changes. We need these times in our life to push us forward. Just think about this like pulse of life. We need that. We don't want life to be perfect all the time, because where's the growth in that? Where's the learning in that?
Oh gosh, you bring it around just so beautifully. Well, if any of you have either one of these gates, gate 5 or gate 15, let us know how it resonates for you. And deeply appreciate you for listening, for tuning in, to being here with us. Thank you to Hannah.
Thank you so much for sharing.
So next time we'll get into the 6th, and if you have any personal insights, those of you who are listening, share them with us, because I think that'd be really cool to start bringing in some like outside thoughts and things as to how each energy shows up for others. So let us know, share with us.
Yeah, you can find us on Instagram, Led by Life Pod. We'll leave it linked below.
Okay.
See you next time.
See ya.